at a different platform is on their platforms. So if you need, let's go ahead and share my screen so you can see the QR codes. There you go. If you need Chinese, 如果需要中文的话, you can scan this QR code. If you need Korean, you can go to the YouTube link and there will be chat on both of those if you need extra language support, but we're happy to have you here on Zoom as well. And you can, even if you have two screens like I do, you can have one on one and one on the other so that you can enjoy both. And I just want to remind everybody, remind everyone that we will play Spot Mr. View again today. So don't forget to look in my screen and you will see Mr. View kind of popping in. Congratulations to those who won 2 weeks ago. And you will get a prize if you email us first. And again, special thanks to all of our sponsor schools. We could not be doing Tuesday Talks without you. Thank you for telling your students, telling your friends, telling your parents about these talks. These admissions officers, they really enjoy connecting with you all, and they would love to have larger groups of students to educate and interact with. And so all of what you do for us is why this can happen. So we just want to say a big thank you once again. And today I am delighted to welcome my guests. And this is probably one of my favorite Tuesday Talks of the cycle, because it's about women's colleges. And I went to a women's college, so I feel like especially close to these women. And I get to like relive my college experience a little bit every time I hear them talk about the benefits of women's colleges. So without further ado, I'm going to let these esteemed colleagues of mine introduce themselves.
Well, hi, I thought I would take it away, and then we're each going to introduce ourselves with our schools. Is that okay with everybody? All right, I haven't heard any protests. So hello, everybody. Welcome to our program. My name's Meredith McDill. I'm an Associate Director of Admission at Smith College. First, we'd like to thank our hosts at InitialView for organizing this event, and we're really happy to be with you. Our 5 colleges travel and present together both physically and virtually to speak not only about our individual institutions, but to give an overview of women's colleges in general. Now we're going to do a little bit of both today and provide you with some thoughts or tips on writing a supplement or why us essay, while leaving plenty of time for your questions at the end of the program. So I encourage you all to enter your questions in the Q&A function as we speak, and then we'll address them at the end. So as I said, you know, we all do a lot of speaking together about both liberal arts colleges and women's colleges all around the world, and often in cultures where there's not a lot of familiarity with either. So I always start with just a little history. Women's colleges were founded during the mid and late 19th century in response to a need for advanced education for women at a time when they were not admitted to most institutions of higher education. So from a high of about 300 or so women's colleges before the widespread coeducational movement, there are now just under 40 women's colleges remaining here in the US. You may have heard of the 7 Sisters, the name that was given to Barnard, Smith, Mount Holyoke, Bryn Mawr, Wellesley, Vassar, and Radcliffe because of our parallel to the Ivy League men's schools, which were founded to provide educational opportunities to women equal to those available to men, and were geared towards women who wanted to study the liberal arts. So one of the first most important factors to note about women's colleges in the US is that we're all pretty much universally small liberal arts colleges. Then during the 1960s and 70s, colleges and universities that had been previously all male started opening their doors to women. So many women's colleges either became co-ed themselves, merged with all male or co-ed institutions, or closed. As a result, the number of women's colleges shrank, and actually the 7 Sisters decreased to just 5. However, our group is still commonly referred to as the 7 Sisters, or the Sisters for short. So we hear from students across the world, especially in cultures where there are many girls' high schools, that there's a reluctance to consider women's colleges because students who have attended girls' high schools think their experience at a women's college will be the same or similar. So we're here to help debunk a lot of myths, But one thing you have to realize is that a women's college in the US will be very different from a girls' high school anywhere, partly because of the partnerships we all have with co-ed schools. So we all have these partnerships and are a part of college consortia, whereby students from other institutions take classes and participate in other activities on our campuses, and our students are able to do the same at co-ed schools. So you absolutely must not think of a women's college as a place where you're somehow going to be cloistered away with all women all the time. In fact, when I host students, families and counselors who come to visit Smith for the first time, they know we're one of the largest women's colleges, and they're always surprised by all the gender diversity they see here. So with that out of the way, we're each going to introduce ourselves and our institutions briefly. So I'll ask my colleague Karen to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith, for that amazing introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen McCleary. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am an associate director of admissions at Barnard College. So I'm really excited to share Barnard with you today. There are sort of four main pillars, as we call them, that make up Barnard's identity. As Meredith just mentioned, like many women's colleges, we are a liberal arts college. What that means for us is that we really want our students learning with an interdisciplinary lens. All of our students enter as undecided majors, and students can wait until the end of their second year to declare their major. So we really want students looking at a variety of subjects before they decide what they're going to study. We are, of course, a women's college. We'll talk all about that identity a little bit later. We're in partnership with Columbia University, literally right across the street from each other. Students can cross-register for classes, take part in clubs, activities, including Division I athletics. So there's some great opportunities for our students to interact with students both at Barnard and at Columbia across the street. And of course, we're located in New York City, right in Manhattan. If you're not familiar with New York City, this is not the Times Square hustle and bustle that you might have heard of. We're in a little bit of a quieter neighborhood, but you have access to all of that hustle and bustle, as well as internships, fun things in the city like museums and restaurants and whatnot. And many students take advantage of the city for both their academic and professional development. We do meet full demonstrated financial need for all of our admitted students. We don't offer any merit or talent-based scholarships. And I do also just want to note that we are test optional for the next 2 admission cycles. So whether you're applying this fall or next fall, it is completely up to you whether or not to submit an SAT or an ACT. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to my next colleague. Thanks, everyone.
And thanks. I am Jennifer Russell, representing Bryn Mawr College. I think we're the smallest of the 7 sisters. We have about 1,300 students. We're the furthest south, so our weather is a little bit milder than some of our northern sisters, but you will definitely experience all 4 seasons here. We are just outside the city of Philadelphia, and our students, we have about 19% of our students come from overseas, so internationally diverse kinds of students, and studying lots of diverse kinds of subjects as well. You might be surprised that math is actually our top major. So we do very well in STEM as well as across the board in the liberal arts and sciences. You will see a teeny tiny little map in that picture, which you probably can't read, but that is important because that highlights our consortium. We are partners with 3 other colleges, so Bryn Mawr, Haverford, Swarthmore, and the University of Pennsylvania. There are literally hundreds of cross registrations every single day, especially with Haverford. So it's extremely well used. It's free to get to the other campus. It's 5 minutes away. Registration is the same, so very, very easy to do. At the same time, we're very different than Haverford and our other partners. And certainly that has to do with the fact that we are a women's college. That's a very important part of our identity. We have lots of traditions on campus. Some are silly, some are serious, some are secret, but really feed into sort of the campus culture and the identity of being a Bryn Mawr woman. So those are a few highlights about Bryn Mawr, and I will pass it on to Mount Holyoke.
Hi, so thanks, Jen. I am Amy Markham from Mount Holyoke College. I'm the Director of International Admission, and I'm going to give you just a few little tidbits about things that I really like about Mount Holyoke, staying a little bit away from some of the facts and figures. But one is that Mount Holyoke is extremely international. So about 27% of our students are from other countries, and that means that you're learning with people from perspectives from all over the world. But something that is often not thought of is who's going to be teaching you. So not only are 50% of our faculty women, but 2/3 of them speak a language in addition to English, and 3/4 of them have lived outside the United States. So that means that you're going to be learning from people who understand culture shock. They understand what it means to possibly be learning in a language that's different than your native language. They understand being in a foreign situation. And so it's really, there's a lot of, I would say, empathy for some of the challenges that happen, especially in the first semester when international students are settling in. So the other thing I just want to mention briefly is what I'm going to call the 3 Ps. And those are pianos, puppies, and puzzles. And so every residence hall at Mount Holyoke, this is kind of a women's college thing, but you might not know it, but every residence hall at Mount Holyoke has a piano in it. So you can play the piano if you want, but we also have private practice areas if you don't want to do it so publicly. But we also, during our exam period, bring puppies to campus so that it's kind of a nice stress reliever. It's called Pet a Pet. And so you get to play with the puppies and reduce any stress about your exams. And then in our library, we have a room that always has a giant puzzle going. So if you just want to take a break and go to a different space, but not leave the building and put in a few puzzle pieces, it's just a really nice way to distract yourself. So those are a few things about Mount Holyoke. And now I'm going to let Meredith tell you about Smith.
Well, hello again. So Smith College is actually one of the largest of the women's colleges with 2,550 students, 15% of whom are citizens of countries outside the US. And we are neighbors with Mount Holyoke. We're in the western part of the state of Massachusetts in a town called Northampton. We are under 2 hours from Boston, about 3 hours from New York City. And we are a member of the largest and most widely utilized college consortium in the US. It's called the 5 College Consortium. We have Smith, Amherst, Mount Holyoke, and Hampshire colleges, and the University of Massachusetts, all within about a 20-kilometer or 12-mile radius. Gives you access to about 7,000 different classes, and there is a lot of intermingling among the 30,000 students in the 5 College Consortium. So Smith is the only women's college with the open curriculum, which is really the most flexible course of study you could have available to you. And we are the first women's college with our own fully accredited engineering program. Partly because of that, about 45% of our students now are majoring in the STEM field: science, technology, engineering, and math. Another distinctive feature of Smith is a very unique living situation we have. Instead of in traditional dormitories, our students live in about 37 different houses spread out around our campus. You can see a small example of a typical house at Smith. This really provides a smaller community within the Smith community, a home away from home for our students. So, to sum it up, we think we offer the best of a lot of worlds at Smith. We are a small residential liberal arts college. You've got the smaller community that our housing system provides, the larger community of the 5 College Consortium. And if you need a big city fix, it's a short trip to either Boston or New York. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Jenna.
Thanks, Meredith. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm representing Wellesley. Wellesley is a small college with about 2,300 undergraduate students on campus, but our students represent one of the most diverse college communities in the US by most measures of diversity, so geographic, linguistic, cultural, and religious. Over 14% of our students are international citizens, and about 40% of our students first learn a language other than English at home. So we're truly a cosmopolitan community. And we sit sit on a vast, really breathtakingly beautiful suburban campus that's just outside of Boston, which is one of the largest college cities in the world. And this location allows our students to enjoy the beauty of the landscape and magnificent architecture, but also to be able to access the city with all of the great social and cultural and academic opportunities that it offers, including cross-registration programs with MIT, Brandeis University, the Olin College of Engineering, and Babson College. And Wellesley really packs the vast research opportunities and state-of-the-art technology that you would typically find at large research universities, but delivers these resources in an environment that's 100% dedicated to undergraduate women. So hands-on learning experiences such as research, internships, and student and faculty collaborations are really an essential part of the Wellesley education. And Wellesley is also really known as a leadership lab for young women and has a long history of developing leaders across a wide variety of fields and at every level. So these include famous women like Hillary Clinton, Mei-Ling Soong, Chinese poet Bing Xian, and our wonderful InitialView co-founder Gloria, who's here with us today. And Wellesley really believes that leadership is not about prominence or power, but about service, and that leadership requires practice like any skill. So Wellesley intentionally builds an environment where students practice leadership at every level. So if you're someone who's excited to make a difference in your community and is eager to affect change, be a mover and a shaker, I think you'll be right at home at Wellesley, and you can certainly learn more about us online. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer, who's going to start talking about unpacking some myths.
All right. Hi. So we wanted to talk, a little bit sort of about the meat of women's colleges and some of the perceptions that are out there, some truths and myths. The first one is that a lot of people think that that women's colleges are all staunch feminists, that one perception is all staunch feminists. And to this, I would respond yes and no. Feminism has really been looks like a broad range of things these days, and it's not the old school American stereotype of protesting, bra burning, hating men. One of the unique things about women's colleges, and this is sort of counterintuitive, is that they are places where you don't have to think of yourself as a woman. You don't have to prove yourself as a woman. Our students don't walk around all day thinking about their gender all day. And why? Because they don't have to. This is what's really liberating at a women's college. I once heard someone say that at women's colleges, you don't get special treatment because you're a woman, but you rather get equal treatment that you deserve and that you might not get elsewhere. Another common perception is that women's colleges students are mostly LGBTQ. And to this, I would say yes and no and maybe, and we don't know. This is not demographics that we collect at our colleges. But when you visit women's colleges, when you talk to women's college students, what you will pick up on is that they are very welcoming and inclusive places. And this is in very large part because our founding principle is that students should not be excluded from higher education because of their gender. So for this reasons, women's colleges are places where the entire gender spectrum of identity and expression is evident and indeed welcomed. There is some thought that women's colleges are elite and lack diversity, that women are running around in pearls and gloves and hats. Also, not just a perception, not necessarily true, although I'm sure we have some pearls. We, using just Bryn Mawr as an example, well over 70% of our students are receiving some kind of financial aid. The vast majority of our students attend public high schools. Almost half of our students are either students of color or international students. And diversity does not just come in the form of demographic data as well. There's a tremendous diversity of opinions and voices, and this sort of circles back to what I was talking about before in terms of women's colleges being very inclusive, welcoming, and really respectful places. And then the final perception that I wanted to comment on is that women's college graduates are not prepared for the real world. And I love this one because I want to say, have you met a women's college graduate? They are very prepared for the real world. They are overwhelmingly very diverse, but impressive and impactful people. There's actually been research that's been done that women's colleges take advantage of opportunities more and in a way that they might not at a co-ed institution. So for example, this could be that women at women's colleges apply for internships more, or leadership positions, or involve themselves in student activities, or even just go and talk to their faculty members more than they might at a co-ed institution. And certainly with some of the leadership positions, and the competition is not equal opportunity, but it's every opportunity. So every opportunity, all leaders on campus are women. And this really gives you very, very valuable experience, which our students take into the real world and perhaps have more of in the real world. So we all know women's college graduates that are pretty famous: Hillary Clinton, Benazir Bhutto, Gloria Steinem. And these are not shy, sheltered women. They can deal with the real world. So there's a few highlights of some myths and truths and somewhere in between about women's colleges. And I will pass it on to Amy.
Thanks, Jen. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is some success and outcomes for women's colleges. And you've probably all heard that, and Jen just referenced it, that women college graduates are disproportionately, excuse me, in some of the highest levels of basically every career field worldwide, even though in the United States, only 2% of women graduates are from women's colleges, yet many of them are in the top positions. But what I really want to just spend a very short time talking about is picking up on what Jen said about the environment that is created in a women's college, and that it's very welcoming and affirming. And when you're just surrounded by women, you start to notice things that aren't present. And that is often men's voices that can dominate over women's voices, men who are in the highest levels of leadership positions in campus organizations and things. Those are all obviously held by women. And so that when you start to see those things and you start to realize some of the ways that maybe you had to have strategies to navigate challenges when you were in a co-educational classroom, you can focus much more just on yourself. And that way, when you get out into what people call the real world afterwards, you're really attuned to things that sometimes you might not have even noticed before, about subtle aspects of discrimination based on gender that you just accepted because it was part of the way things are. But now you're more aware of it and you can really work around those challenges. Gloria, can you go to the next slide, please? And so what I also want to pick up on is something that several of us have referenced already, and that is the bond among the sister colleges. So even though I would say there's some friendly rivalry among the five of us, each graduate from their own institution is going to think that that one is the best one, but we also really are truly part of a sisterhood. And that carries on well after someone graduates from Mount Holyoke. And if I'm a women's college graduate and I'm hiring someone for a job and I see somebody who graduated from a women's college, I'm going to gravitate toward wanting to know more about that person because I know some of the qualities that have been developed in that person that would be valuable in any career field. We also have clubs in countries and cities around the world where if you're moving to a new location, the sisters have clubs, and each of our individual schools have clubs where you can network. And that sisters network is just really extraordinary and it lasts for a lifetime. So that's just a peek at a couple of aspects of what makes women's colleges special. And now you're going to get a few tips about writing the why essay for your supplement.
Thanks so much, Amy. So you've heard a little bit about each of our schools. You've heard about what makes women's colleges special. And now you're wondering, well, what about the actual application, right? So there are many different components of the application, a lot of which you've heard about through these other Tuesday talks, but we want to focus on the supplemental questions. So supplemental questions are extra short answer essays that you might have to complete for each college that you apply to. These are going to be specific to each college. Barnard has different questions than Bryn Mawr, than Wellesley, than everyone else on this call and beyond. And so we really want to talk about tailoring those questions to each institution. While all of the application is important in holistic review, the supplemental questions really help each of our schools get a sense of who you'll be on our campus as both a student and a person. So if we could click once. So here is an example of what someone might write in our sort of why Barnard question. We're asking, why do you want to go to Barnard in particular, as opposed to any other liberal arts women's college? And so this person has written, the Barnard community appeals to me because of its supportive, close-knit nature that will empower me because of my gender identity, not in spite of it. So that sounds great, right? Like that sounds like, we talked about women's colleges, we talked about Barnard supporting people who identify as women. But if we keep clicking, we can see that this sentence can actually apply to each of the other schools here in the call today. These are all true statements. All of our schools will empower our students because of their gender identity and provide supportive, close-knit communities. But because this sentence can apply to really any one of our schools, you can substitute that school for anyone else. We're really looking for a few more specifics here when we're getting to the why essay. So if we could go to the next slide, we have a couple of examples of what do we mean exactly when we say specific. So here we have examples, not necessarily, we don't want you to write these things exactly in your why questions, but these are just some examples of how you might take a statement that is a little bit more general and tailor it to a specific school. So for example, maybe you visited, maybe you took a virtual tour, you did a virtual info session, and you're like, wow, this campus is just absolutely beautiful. And so you could just say that I want to go to your school because the dorms are beautiful. Or you could give a few more specifics, right? So like, I feel like Bryn Mawr is a place I could call home. I have a friend who attends. She told me about the dorm rooms that have wood fireplaces, which sounds amazing, by the way. And so this student really says, I could picture myself living here and learning here. And same with each of these other examples, right? We're taking sort of general statements that are true about, the school that you would be writing about, but they're also true for a lot of different schools, right? So we're really looking to see what is it about the specific mission to empower women? Are there particular classes or centers that really appeal to you? So by providing those details and making sure that you can't just substitute one school name for another, that'll really help us see that you have done your research. You've attended sessions like this one, you've maybe looked through our website, perhaps attended a few other virtual sessions and say, yes, this is why Barnard, this is why Mount Holyoke, this is why Smith is the place where I want to be. So giving those specifics both about our school and then how you're going to take advantage of our school's resources will really help us understand who you're going to be on our campus as both a student and a member of our community. All right, so with that, I'm going to pass it on to, I believe, Jenna's next.
Thanks, Karen. So sort of to sum up these points, when you're going to sit down and write those why supplement essays, there are a few things that you really want to keep in mind. So you want to remember that community, especially in the context of a women's college, really matters a lot, and fit is critically important to us. I think this is true of any college university, but it's especially important to women's colleges because of the unique mission-driven educational environment that we provide. We really want to understand what sort of community you're looking for in a college and how you see yourself contributing to our communities. And in order to best communicate this in your writing, you'll first need to do some research to really understand what we have to offer and to think through how those specific opportunities really align with your goals and your passions. So for every Y supplement, you really want to learn about the college's values and the unique opportunities that they provide. And when you learn something that excites you, communicate why to us. We want to learn about you through this essay. Why do you think we'd be a good fit for each other? And what do you see yourself getting out of this education and this community? What do you see yourself contributing? Likewise, this is another piece of the application where you really have the opportunity to share more about who you are, what goals you have, what's interesting to you, and really connect that to the fit that you see between us and you. You want to provide specific examples rather than generalities when you're doing this. So maybe there's a particular lab on one of our campuses that's doing research that you'd like to get involved with, or a specific tradition that maybe speaks to what you're looking for in a community. And a great way to really check whether you're being specific enough is to test that final product using another college's name. If you can swap out the name for one college with another and the essay still makes sense, then you're not being specific enough, and you probably need to go back, do some more research, and really think about what it is that you're looking for. All right, thanks. And with that, I'll hand it over to Meredith.
Okay, so what you see here is a cheat sheet. We hope it's handy. We hope it'll be helpful. It outlines our application deadlines, our testing requirements, our interview opportunities, and financial aid policies. So in conclusion, we hope, given everything that you've heard, when you survey the now 170-year history of women's colleges in the US, we hope you agree that you really can't help but be struck by the formative role we've played in the advancement of women and in the power of women's colleges to engender this palpable coming to selfhood among our students. The experience of being part of this alternative sphere of unlimited possibility really does bind graduates across the generations into an affirming sisterhood. So despite our small size and our fewer numbers, the historic sisters and the many institutions founded in our likeness, both in the US and internationally, we think have had a tremendous effect propelling women forward as change agents in the larger world that's often devalues them. And we feel now as ever, the world really needs women's colleges. So we're going to head into the question and answer period of our time together. But we ask you to please feel free to visit our websites and write us with any questions you have that might be specific to our institutions. So I believe now we're going to take your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all of this information and for being efficient so that we could actually have a good time for questions. And so I just wanted to remind everyone, I know some people have typed in the chat some of our questions. If you don't mind also typing in the Q&A box so that we can kind of see what all the questions are there, and we will answer as we go here. So, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen for just a second. I will bring back the contact information in a little bit, but just so that we can see each other's faces and say hi. Okay, so I'll start. I know there were some specific questions about institutions, and we really encourage everybody, especially if you're interested in one particular school, that you go to their own virtual sessions as well, because then you'll get a little bit more detail, and we'll answer some in the Q&A if we see them relevant to a lot of people, but we're going to focus on kind of broader questions that might apply to all of the schools. But let's start with, there is a question about sororities and sorority culture, and being a women's college, that scene looks different. So I don't know if any of you can want to weigh in on that a little bit. And I know that some of these students and families who are on these calls are not really familiar with that to begin with and are nervous about it, just from seeing things on TV or movies. And so you could kind of weigh in, not just whether or not there are sororities, to maybe social life in general on your campuses and in your communities.
Well, I can take a stab at this first. Smith does not have sororities, but actually our students can go to some co-ed institutions in the area and join them if they'd like. But, some people hear about the housing system that I briefly mentioned at Smith, where students live in these houses. And then when they say that sounds like a sorority, I stop them and say, it's not. And I think this is what's common to our institutions. Sororities are sort of exclusive, right? Only certain people are invited to join them. And at our institutions, we have very inclusive institutions. And certainly that's true when some people get confused and hear about the Smith housing system and, sort of compare it to a sorority. Students are mixed in our houses, class years, international students with US students. So it's a very inclusive environment for all of our students. I think we would all agree. So that's the first thing I would contrast about sororities with our institutions. And I don't know if anyone else would want to add to that.
Yeah, I can jump in because Barnard students do have the opportunity to join sororities through Columbia. But I will say it's not as big a part of our campus life as, I don't know, for me, when I think of sororities, I always think of the TV show Greek that was on a few years ago. I don't know if anybody watched that, but it is not at all like that, I will say. There are plenty of social opportunities for our students, whether or not you choose to join a sorority. And I would say the minority of students do join one. Like Meredith was saying, there are a lot of different social opportunities that are based on inclusion. Clubs that are centered around maybe shared identities that our students have, shared interests. So I think those are things you're going to find a lot more commonly used.
I would also just add really quickly that the consortia that you've heard that we're all a part of, really because we're all partnered with coeducational institutions, it gives our students a chance to blend some coeducation into their women's college experience to the extent that they want it or they don't. So these consortia also allow social opportunities and things. So it's really a blending to your desire or not at all.
Wonderful. Great. Well, you all are coming off a lot of Tuesday talks, and a lot of them talking about liberal arts colleges. And so there is a question of like, well, what's the difference? I'm intrigued by a women's college, but what's really the difference between a women's college and other liberal arts colleges? It sounds like there are a lot of similarities, particularly when it comes to the actual education experience and the curriculum. So can you all kind of highlight a little bit more of like why a women's college is different? What specifically is really different other than the fact that, all the students identify as women, but is there something that feels different about the actual education?
I'll mention, I think one of my colleagues mentioned earlier too, about women at women's colleges exploring academic areas that are typically overrepresented by men. So STEM, economics, computer science, some of these things that women have been underrepresented in the past. So at Bryn Mawr, for example, well over a third of our students are majoring in math or science, which is 2.5 times the national average, which is pretty remarkable. Now, not to say that you can't do STEM at a co-ed institution, of course you can, but what is different at a women's college or a place like Bryn Mawr is that 1 out of 3 of your female friends is also doing math and science. So that's one thing that makes the environment different, is sort of who you're surrounded with, who your role models are, because you're not going to find those percentages at a co-ed institution. So you're lifted up in a way in certain majors, certainly in STEM and economics and a number of other different majors where women have been underrepresented, and you're overrepresented at women's colleges.
I think what Jennifer's getting at here is that women's colleges are really sites of empowerment for the students that they serve. Students who attend women's colleges really learn through their classwork, through the community that's fostered, how to use their voice and to not be afraid to speak up and to feel really empowered in every space that they're in with their learning. I know a lot of students that I talk to in their information sessions that they give, they're always like, you know what? I've never once thought in my classroom at a women's college, this class really needed the perspective of a cisgender man. So I think, at women's colleges where everyone around you is really empowered to be the person that is being served by that institution, to really get that knowledge, that students can take that off with them when they're in a boardroom someday or in graduate school, and they're not afraid to be the one to raise their hand and speak up, even when maybe the women around them are not able to do that comfortably.
I completely resonate with each of those. I just wanted to really quickly add that I think this is also reflected in the curriculum that we offer, in that a lot of like the traditional subjects that you might think of, that I don't know about you all, but in my high school experience, were very much dominated by male voices. I'm thinking of all the literature classes I ever took, for example, are going to be dominated by specifically women's voices, women of color, women from lower socioeconomic statuses. We're thinking not just about gender as a form of identity, but about all different identities that our students are bringing to the table. And our classes reflect this. Just the other day, I was talking with a Barnard student about this economics of gender class that she was taking, which sounds fascinating. And so it's going to be baked not just into the discussions that our students are having, but the actual courses that they'll be taking as well.
I'll just weigh in real quick, even though I'm not representing any school today. But when I was at Wellesley, I had a lot of classmates who would actually do the cross-registration program with MIT. So they would go to MIT and take a lot of classes there. And they would come back and say, there is just a tremendous difference in how I feel inside that classroom when I am not with like an empowering and small and close-knit community. I'm in a larger place with a lot of men, and they are given the opportunity to speak more, unfortunately. Like, we try, but we're not able to. And so I remember feeling like, is that a good thing or a bad thing, for the real world? What are we, the real world, what's going to happen when we go in? And I think all of us felt like we were much better able to handle the true competition that exists when you have all genders. But that time of preparation and that time of reprieve and that time of, refreshment of being with all women was helped us all feel much stronger, much more excited about kind of facing the world. And it's not a safe haven because it's still the real world. It's just that you get the benefit of this shared experience that enables you to be even that much better when you graduate. So that's my 2 cents. I'll stop there. I did want, since I did mention this cross registration, I know multiple of you have this consortiums or partnerships or collaborations with different schools and campuses. So there has been a question of like, if you want to do a joint program, do you get 2 degrees? Is that something that happens? Or do you just take some classes or is it a combination of whatever you want to do? Anyone want to weigh in on that?
Sure. I think I saw a question about Wellesley and MIT, so I can speak to that. So at Wellesley specifically, we have a number of different partnerships with other colleges, and I think that's true of my colleagues and their institutions here as well. So students can take classes at other institutions, but that's kind of just a cross-registration. So you're not going to get a different degree or a degree from that other school that you're cross-registering at. You're still going to get the degree from the women's college that you're attending. However, some of us may also have partnerships where you do get a dual degree. These are often in engineering. So for example, at Wellesley, if you do choose to pursue our dual degree engineering track with MIT, you would graduate with both a Bachelor of Arts from Wellesley as well as an SB from MIT in engineering.
Wonderful. Okay, there are some people who are asking, okay, so if I've rarely experienced gender inequality, great. And, is there any, what can I get from women's colleges, or am I suitable? Am I someone that would do well at a women's college or benefit from it, or be someone that is attractive to you, admission officer?
I want to jump in because it's a little bit related to the question about, how our curricula are different at women's colleges or not. I want to say that certainly, for Smith, the majority of our students don't choose us because we're a women's college. I mean, in fact, many of them might get dragged to campus, kicking and screaming for their campus visit, by their mom, who might be a graduate of Smith, or, their grandmother might have been. And then when they get here, and I think it's true of all of our institutions, they realize that first and foremost, we are excellent liberal arts colleges. And I think that that's what attracts students. But every year at Smith, we survey our graduating seniors and we ask them, what was the best thing about your Smith experience? And every year, the number one answer is the fact that it's a women's college. So there's something, transformative that happens during the 4 years here. And it may not be why students chose us. So I want to put that out there, just for some information. I think, if you're interested in liberal arts colleges, definitely look at some women's colleges and you'll be surprised what you find. And then there's this added benefit of just, being in an atmosphere, being able to observe strong women leaders in action, take on leadership roles for yourself, that helps you develop and hone your voice, and then be able to go out and use your voice as an agent of change in your community, whatever it is you go on to decide to do. So that I would offer that.
Great. There are questions about like what you're looking for. And I know that's always a hard question kind of to answer, especially, there are 5 different institutions here too. And you may be looking for some different things, but when thinking about writing the essays, since we were talking about that, but also just generally in the college application, what are some things that you are looking for in, what makes you think that a student might be successful, might be a good fit? I think there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things, but I've heard kind of words like agent of change, community empowerment, things like that. And so I feel like there are themes that obviously make a women's college a better fit for certain women than not. So I don't know if you're able to kind of weigh in at all for these students and parents who are like, well, what are you looking for?
I'll take that one, Gloria. So some of the things that you just mentioned, like agent of change and, a leader and all, those are things that in order to do those things, you kind of have to have certain qualities or be in an environment that's going to help you build those. And so something that I know I'm looking for in an essay is self-awareness. And so if you know yourself, then you, in thinking about being an agent of change, then you know what your passion is, you know what your strengths are to bring about some kind of change. And so how does that play itself out in an essay? I would say that it's the student who shows us more than tells us about something. And so we read lots of very nicely written essays that describe an experience that a student has. But the ones that rise to a higher level are the ones that focus much less on the details of the experience or the influential person in their life or a revelation that they discovered, and much more about how did that impact them. So maybe you ran for an elected office in your school. We don't need to know about the posters that you made and the social media account that you set up to run for that position. What we really want to know is, like, what did you learn about yourself in doing that? What did you learn about people around you and how they respond to you? How do you use that for other things going forward? So that's really more showing us rather than just saying, well, I had to register for this position and I had to let people know that I was running. So stay away from those details, which is challenging because it's your story and you want us to know everything. But really what we want to know is about how something affected you and what did you learn? How did you grow? That kind of insight will make you a great student. It'll make you a great friend. It'll make you a great leader.
Wonderful. Anything else to add to that? That was great. I think when we talk about, when we talk about interviews, the same thing. There are a lot of people who will talk very specifically about kind of the how. And our interviewers are always like, but why? And so I think that is the same kind of mentality that goes into your supplements and your essays about, why? Because there will be a lot of you who have done similar things and have similar hows, but the why will be different. Let's see. Okay, there are some mechanical questions about applications. I don't know if we want to go into any of them. Do you require a resume? I think I know the answer to that, but does anybody want? Do any of you require a resume? Yeah, I don't. No requirements for resumes. Outcomes. This is always a question in terms of outcomes. And we talked about how women who graduate from women's colleges are quite successful, have really great outcomes. But any more specifics about employment versus graduate school, particularly I think among international students, if you have any kind of quick data points, just kind of at top of mind. We don't have any specific ones right now, and I'm not asking necessarily for specific, but you all have a sense of what kind of a typical path would be for an international student?
I'd say that, just like there's no typical student. I think all of us would agree at our schools, there's not necessarily a typical path that students take either, because they're all just different individuals from all different walks of life with so many different interests they're going on to pursue after they leave. But just some Smith statistics here. 5 years after graduating, about 69% of our students will have gone on, to medical school, to law school, to earn an MBA or a PhD. If you roll that out 10 years from graduating, the statistic goes up to 75%. But a lot of students, go into the workforce first, then go to graduate school. And, for us, those students, about 92% of them are employed within 2 years of having graduated, just to give you some statistics. But, our graduates are really going into so many different walks of life and feeling equipped, to do that, and feeling equipped to make changes, as they decide to maybe make shifts in their fields, maybe even go into an entirely different career halfway through their working lives, because, they've got a solid foundation they're able to build on after they leave our places.
Great. There have been a few students who are asking specifically about gender studies majors and programs. My question is more kind of like, if people are interested in specific majors at your schools, what is the best way to kind of find out about those majors? I mean, I'm assuming on the website, but are there other kind of resources that you all would recommend when people want to learn specifically about majors at colleges?
Yeah, I think the website's going to be a great resource. Without having looked at any of my colleagues' websites, but I can pretty much guarantee that there are going to be websites for each of the different majors or departments that we all have. And so those will be a really rich area of resource. You can see not only what courses are offered, but what research the faculty is doing. And you can also see how the different majors differ between each of our schools, the other schools that you're looking at, because a lot of schools have, you know, a gender studies major or a psychology major or what have you. But each of those schools are going to have different requirements of classes that you have to complete for that major. They might have a slightly different bend, you know, they might focus on one thing more than another. So really getting into the nitty gritty and looking at, okay, what are the actual courses that I'm going to be completing in this major will help you see, oh, okay, this is how the gender studies program is different at all these different schools. I would also recommend getting in contact with students if possible that are pursuing those majors. At Barnard, for example, we have an email address, askastudent@barnard.edu, where you can write in your questions. That's accessed by all of our student workers and anyone with experience with whatever you're curious about, whether it's academics, clubs, et cetera, can respond to your questions. And you know, us admissions officers, we are definitely experts in the admissions fields. We know a lot about financial aid, and of course, we know a lot about our schools. But our students are going to be the real experts in terms of the lived experiences on the ground in those particular majors. So it's really good to get their perspectives as well.
Yeah, I went ahead and put the emails and websites back up so that people can take the time to maybe take a screenshot or jot these down, especially if you're interested in a specific institution. And I will just also say, I think talking to current students is amazing in terms of understanding what it's like to be a student on the campus. And I'm one of those people, Meredith, who kicked and screamed about applying to a women's college because my mom told me to. And I actually talked to more than one student, and I will, you know, be really frank. The first student I talked to was not, I was like, oh yeah, I don't want to go there. But then I talked to a second student. So I think, you know, maybe talk to a couple students if you can, and that's the beauty of college is that it's such a diverse community, and you will have people that you connect with, and then you'll have people that maybe you don't connect with. But but if you talk to current students, me talking to that second student was what sealed the deal for me for Wellesley. And I talked to her after I got in. So I talked to someone before I got in, I talked to someone after I got in. And I think when you talk to current students at different points of your process, it will give you insight. It will help you imagine what it's like to be on campus. It will help you imagine what it's like to be a classmate of that person. And if you want to understand majors, the best thing is to talk to someone in that major. And so definitely take advantage of those opportunities. There will always be a question about test optional. And so I just want to kind of like at the last couple minutes here, the specific question is, you know, do you have a rough percentage? And for any of you who are interested in that kind of information, we've had other sessions about it, and we'll continue to. But I guess if you all could give words of wisdom on how to approach whether or not to take a test, whether or not to submit a test, that would be great. Anyone want to take a stab?
Sure. So our institutions, if we weren't already test optional, Wellesley was, and I know some of my colleagues here, their institutions already were test optional before the pandemic, but went test optional in part because we really want students to stay safe and to take care of themselves. This has been a really challenging year and a really challenging time. And we know that many students don't have access to testing or to test preparation. And so when you're really trying to decide whether you're going to take the test in the first place, one consideration definitely should be, you know, is this something that's going to be safe and feasible for you to even do? And if not, that is perfectly okay. And we really want you to focus on, you know, staying safe, not having to, you know, travel outside of the country to test if that's not something that's going to be great for you. And I know Wellesley specifically, about half of our students submitted testing last year, half went test optional, and in our admitted class sort of reflected those numbers as well. So about half of our admitted students submitted standardized test scores and half didn't. So colleges, when they say that they are test optional, they truly mean that. And if you've taken the test and you're trying to decide whether or not to submit it, I think one great thing to do is to look at the average test scores on each of our institution's websites. We all publish those. And of course, within the context of a holistic application review, those average numbers aren't going to tell you everything about how we're thinking about the standardized test scores that you submit if you do choose to submit those, but they can be a good benchmark to help you sort of think about, am I in the sort of range where this might be something that I want to include as part of my application? So if you can really think about, do I feel like my test score is contributing something or showing something that's going to add to my application, then that might be something that you want to include. And if it's not, that is perfectly fine. It's just one less aspect that we're going to look at when we're reviewing your application. So we're really going to focus on, your transcript, the rigor of your coursework, all of these other details that come out in the application besides your standardized test scores.
Thank you for weighing in on that. And if you are still having questions about holistic review, go back to our Tuesday Talk archives. We have many, many talks about holistic review and all the components that are really much more important than the standardized tests. Okay, well, thank you so much. I want to be mindful of time, and I'm really, really grateful once again, Meredith, Amy, Karen, Jenna, and Jen, thank you so much for spending your morning with us. For all the students and counselors and parents, thank you so much for coming. We are going to take a little break from Tuesday Talks so that people can get ready for their interviews and do their interviews. And also, if you are a Chinese speaker and you have Chinese parents who can't understand these sessions, please make sure that they know about our parent sessions that are coming up. That's what we're going to focus on in 2 weeks, and scan the QR code if you're interested. In the meantime, watch our space, watch our WeChat, watch our emails, watch our Instagram, and you'll know when the next Tuesday Talks come. But again, you can go to the archives and watch all of the ones from before. Keep in touch, and thank you so much again for coming. We've really enjoyed our time together. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.